Good day, everybody, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live. This is Ross Ort joining you from a surprisingly rainy Phoenix, Arizona. And I'd love to hear from where everybody else is joining us from. And if you have the opportunity, we have an ability for you to add comments as we have our discussion here today. But first, we'd love to hear where everybody's joining in from. Today's topic is going to be quite interesting. It's centered around SAP's evolving positioning. And I'm pleased to be joined by two people who have seen a lot of SAP evolution. In fact, I got permission to sort of age them, here this morning, and because they both started out at about the same time back in the 90s with SAP customers, and they both admitted to be guilty of writing a lot of custom code in their time. Many of you may know Bob Cummings, CEO of LeapGreat from our other LinkedIn Lives. And we're joined today by Tami Becker, the Global Head of RISE High Growth Programs. And welcome to both of you. And maybe I'd love to hear from Tami just to tell me a bit about your background and role at SAP.
Would love to. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody from and thank you for spending the next little bit with us. I am from sunny Denver. Sorry to say, Ross, it is not raining today. The sun is out and it is beautiful. You can't tell by the lighting, but it is a gorgeous day. A little bit about myself, and Ross dated me just a little bit, but I'm going to go even further, Bob. I hope you don't mind. But I've been at SAP for over 30 years. And when I first started, I was actually a customer before. And the way I like to introduce myself is a little bit of evolution. It includes from an SAP perspective, but when I started at SAP, I was a finance consultant, and I have a computer science background. And we would go in and we would talk with our customers about, what their processes were that day. There was nothing like best business practices 30 years ago. It was, how are you running your business, and how can I build that into, my applications? And SAP was known for fantastic integration even back then, but they were also known for the flexibility. And how much fun was it to actually create user exits, enhancements? But when you fast forward 25 years and you realize the amount of technical debt that we built up, for our customers, it is really causing problems for our customers moving forward into the cloud, which is what Rise and Grow is really about, that our customers' journeys to the cloud. And what I'm doing now, it's really exciting. It's probably one of my favorite roles at SAP. Over the years, I'm running the RISE Global Programs team, and have a great team of people that we focus on programs to help our customers with that journey to the cloud. And we work very much with the ecosystem as well to help build up applications, create the visions. And I'll stop there because I think that's a great lead-in for Bob.
Yeah, Bob, why don't I hear about yourself? You've had a few years under your belt with SAP. Why don't you highlight that for us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ross. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I'm joining from, it was rainy Paris. The sun just came out, but it's still cold here. So, and thanks so much, Tami, for joining us today. It's great to see you again. And it's the more I speak or hear from you, Tami, the more I'm always amazed how close our careers or how similar they were. We both sort of started at the same time. I started in 1990. So as far as aging, that goes back, I guess, almost 35 years. Actually 35 years, yep, if I do the math properly. I started doing implementations just like you at some of the first US customers at the time. I was working out of Philadelphia. We did DuPont, Kodak, Bristol-Myers, a bunch of companies like that. And like you said, I mean, even though we had standard software as such, we didn't really have standard practices or standard processes, and we just kind of winged it. And a lot of that included a lot of building of code, and I'm sure starting in consulting and then some leadership roles. And just like Tami, I was responsible for two of the transition programs, first from R2 to R3, and then later from R3 to ECC. And I apologize for the strange name ECC, because at the time we had a goal to eliminate the naming of the technical component. And so we said, let's name it something that nobody will ever use, and then they'll speak about SAP ERP or something else. and we called it ECC, and we thought it would go away. Unfortunately, it stuck around, and that's why everybody uses the word ECC, Enterprise Core Component, at the time. But anyway, it's been a long ride, but always very exciting. Just like you said, Tami, it's always exciting to try and bring the benefits to the installed base by bringing them into a new generation, and looking forward to continuing work with yourselves.
Sounds great. Maybe we could start, Tami, by talking a little bit about what's changing in the market and what is evolving with SAP strategy.
Of course. That's should we show the business suite slide?
Yeah.
Might help for a little bit of context. So I think a lot of folks right now, from a rise and grow perspective, we're very focused on the cloud ERP. And one of the things I think that our customers would like us to focus on is not just the core piece, but the end-to-end business processes. And when we focus just on core, I mean, it is core. I mean, it is the ECC component, Bob. It is the core component, now called Cloud ERP. But I think that, if I think about it, one of my roles at SAP was pre-sales, and I did pre-sales in public sector, higher education, and we would walk in and talk with our customers then about the intelligent enterprise. I'm sure a lot of people remember that intelligent enterprise talks. But when we talked about it, SAP has always had end-to-end business processes. And when we first started, they were in core. Now, as we've evolved, we're using a lot of cloud applications, which is great from a flexibility perspective. But when I would talk about intelligent enterprise, though, and I'll use an overhead projector as my example, which I could use right now because I know the lighting in my office is not fantastic. But if I'm a professor and I walk into a room and the overhead projector doesn't work or the light bulb is out, this is how easy an end-to-end process is to talk about. So that the professor then logs a ticket. At that point, it would have been CRM. Now it's our CX applications. And that ticket then triggers a few different events using, now it would be SAP Business Technology Platform, or SAP Build specifically, to automate this. But that would trigger what kind of projectors in that room. So it's checking inventory. Do we have the light bulb for that projector? If it's not in inventory, it's going to trigger a purchase rec and a purchase order in Ariba. And as soon as the part comes in, it's going to go into inventory, into Cloud ERP. And once it's in inventory, another trigger to SuccessFactors to say, who has the skill set to change that light bulb? When are they available? When is the room available? And all of this is within SAP and our applications across our business suite. So the person goes in, they change the light bulb, they close the ticket. By the way, everything in finance is updated. I mean, that's exciting when you think about an end-to-end business process that covers all of our line of business applications, including the core ERP. And that's our customers want us to start focusing on end-to-end business processes. And how do we get there? That starting point might be Cloud ERP, but it could be anywhere along the line. But it all sits on top of Business Technology Platform. And I'm excited to actually talk about Business Data Cloud in a little bit. But I think we really want to help our customers get to the clean core so that we can security upgrades. All of that will drive to that AI top part where we can actually start using AI with meaningful data to help drive, again, business outcomes for our customers. So I think the business suite, I'm really excited about it. You can tell.
That sounds great. As you were thinking, I was wondering if there's a joke in there, like how many applications does it take to change a light bulb or something like that? But I'm wondering, Bob, from your perspective, how is it different than what you saw with past programs?
Yeah, well, actually, to speak about that example, Tami, you said at the end of that example that was very exciting. I remember my young daughter once asking me, "What do you do, and what does SAP do?" And I explained something like you did, one of these processes, and then at the end I also said, "You see, that's exciting," and she said, "That sounds utterly boring," for them, but for me it's also exciting. But yeah, I think the difference from past programs, Ross, is that it's. Today, there's a lot to think about. I mean, when I think back to the old days of, moving from a kind of a monolithic R2 to a monolithic R3 and then on again to ECC, it was, like I said, a kind of a monolith. It was one thing to think about, you move. But today there's a lot to think about. You're moving from an on-premise to a cloud world. You're trying to think greenfield, brownfield. You're trying to think things like all of these tools around it, like BTP. You have also implementation tool, chain tools, Signavio, all this stuff, right? Then there's, of course, not just the core. As Tami explained, there's a lot of peripheral systems that are around there, like you mentioned, SuccessFactors, Ariba. All of those worlds have grown tremendously, and so the core ERP is kind of the cloud ERP is kind of like at the center, like of a web, right, of different things that go on. So making that move is not as straightforward as it used to be. You have to really, there's many more moving parts and a lot more to think about. And so when I hear customers speak about this, they sometimes struggle with saying, they kind of have this idea. They say, SAP is great, it works, it's bulletproof, right? The thing's running. Do I really need to move that now, right? What is the value of doing that? And then we can show them the value, but then they say, well, what is the risk in doing that? So it's always going back and forth between kind of risk and value, and that's, I think, what we spend a lot of our time talking with customers about, is trying to make clear what the value is, and then showing them a way that you can actually reduce that risk of moving forward.
Okay, makes sense. And Tami, I'm just wanting back to your slide there, if maybe we drill down a little bit, if there's a bit more detail that you'd like to share about that. And I know, if possible, there was a question from Raj. He was wondering a little bit about, not only the adopting of RISE, but what about the value and things like that after adopting it, and maybe if there's an ability to comment about the transition to, and then, afterwards, if there's a bit of a drill down on either this slide that you've got a bit more detail.
Yeah, if you can advance one slide, let's talk about a little bit more of the details. So we talk about RISE and Grow, but what it's really about is our customer's journey to cloud ERP, and then moving forward into the business suite. But I think one of the things that, from a value perspective, we've had so many conversations with both IT and the business, but I'm going to use an IT example in this one. And that is, when we talk with IT, it's generally, how are things going? We've had several customers say, we're really not interested in going RISE or Grow. We're running in a hyperscaler, we're absolutely fine, and everything's going well. And then when you really dig into how things are going, everything's going well from a keeping the lights on perspective, but the business has this laundry list of business enhancements that they would like IT to help them on and focus on. But I think IT is very involved with managing the upgrades, managing security, keeping, like I said, the lights on. And we want to get away from that. And I think, and so that they can focus on, quite frankly, the more fun things like building AI applications. But you've got to get to a certain point. So you've got to go through the journey to get to a more fit to standard, and to the point where SAP is managing the security. And again, when I talk about security, it's, I know that our customers have secure environments, but what I learned in the last year is, when hackers, kind of go at you to try and get into to infiltrate your system, it sounds so, spyish, but they do. We're the weak point. They're targeting the people, not necessarily the infrastructure. And I don't know if everybody remembers the casino that got hit and lost millions of dollars. That was from one person falling for a scam, and they got into the environment. But what we look at that is, the security is kind of like a glass house. But when SAP works on security, we've got it into a bunker. So there's one way in. So it's very secure, and we're managing that for you. That's a huge value. Another thing that we do is, if we find a problem, we fix it once, and then we fix it for everybody. So individual customers don't have to find those problems and fix them themselves. SAP is going to fix it, and we're going to fix it for everybody. So we're doing the upgrades. We're doing the security. We're helping you. We're keeping the lights on for you so you can focus on more value. But the RISE and Grow journeys, so RISE is really meant for our existing customers. And how can we help our customers get rid of, for example, that technical debt, and get to a clean core and a fit to standard in cloud ERP, where Grow is more for our new customers that would, and their journey to the cloud, and how we can get them to cloud, and then taking advantage of, all of the integrations and applications that we have. So there's a lot of benefits, and I know that we've got some more coming up to talk about with that. But whether it's greenfield, brownfield, with a rise or grow journey, we are putting the pieces together. That's what really how we've evolved over the last 4 years, because I think we didn't maybe realize how difficult it was going to be for some of our customers to journey to the cloud and to get to that clean core. But if they really want to take advantage of AI, which is the ultimate goal, I think, for a lot of companies now, we've got to help them get there. So that's really what Rise and Grow are meant to do.
And Bob, I was just picking up something based on what Tami said. She was talking about Rise versus Grow, the greenfield versus brownfield, but you also said there's a different dimension, this risk versus value. And, what did you mean by that in this context?
Yeah, so when I think about what we've been hearing from customers the last years, I mean, I think if you go back 2 or 3 years ago, it was really about when should we do when should we move, why should we move and stuff. Now, really, most of the discussion is just how should we move, and basically, like Tami says, it's the journeys. What is the best way to do this? I think everybody talks about the like the maintenance end and stuff like that. But I don't think that is really the main driver. I think a lot of people think it's the main driver, but it's not really. What I found is companies realize they have to modernize. They have to go to more secure environments. They have to go to the cloud. They have to prepare for AI, right? They have a lot of old technical debt, which some of which Tami and I are guilty of writing, right, from the early days. It's really they need to get to a better place. And so it's really about these journeys. But as we all know, and as the picture that Tami showed is, this is like right in the middle of your enterprise. When you change an ERP system, it's not like changing a CRM or another one. I always say it's like in a building. When you look at a building, you have the core where all of the machinery and plumbing and the elevators go up and down. It's like changing that piece, which touches everything. And so people are afraid to touch it sometimes. They say, well, it's very risky to touch that. And then the question is, well, when I change it, I'll just have an updated ERP system, right? What is the value of that? So we believe there's a lot of value. We've seen it in many companies. And we also believe there are ways you can actually reduce that risk. And that's what we exist for. We're trying to reduce that risk for customers. So it's a bit like, I always think what we try to talk about is, you say, on an x-axis, if the bottom is risk and it's the x-axis is risk and the y-axis is value. A lot of people are thinking kind of along the x-axis. They're more worried about the risk than the value, and we're like kind of trying to flip it and say, hey, if we can remove the risk, let's focus on the value and see how we can get there.
That's an interesting dilemma, I guess, between that, because it's people often think they just have to focus on one and can't get the other. And what's your perspective, Tami, on that dilemma, this risk versus value?
I totally agree with Bob. I think that, we know and we recognize that the ERP projects, they're huge. And Ross, I loved your analogy. It's like doing open heart surgery on your business to try and move forward, especially with the technical debt that we have, that our customers have created. And I think, though, we still have the foundation. We've got the integrated processes. We've got the data and tools. We're working with our partners like LeapGreat. We're also working with software partners to help accelerate that. And we can talk about that in a minute. But I think that you do have to focus on the business outcomes. You've got to focus on the value that you're getting and the future outlook. And I always think about it as, what's the total cost to do the move versus the total cost to your business of doing nothing. And the total cost of doing nothing could be a tragedy, for a business, because their competition are moving forward. Right. And they need to move forward. If you stay back on ERP, you're losing the ability for AI, yes, but what about automation? What about process efficiency? Those are all things that you need to take into account to prove the value and let us work on helping to mitigate the risk. So I think I totally agree with what Bob said.
It's a very interesting thing, really resonates with me, because I was at a conference recently that had over 100 SAP customers, and I kept hearing this dilemma over and over again. Everybody was debating like brown versus green and things like that, but what really stood out to me is one CIO who explained it this way. He says, if I go into a board meeting and tell them we need to spend millions on an upgrade that works the same, I might get fired. But if I ask the business about using this opportunity to do a transformation, they tell me I'm not going to go through that pain again. So if I propose it, I could get fired. So, I guess question maybe for you, Bob, how does one solve that dichotomy?
Yeah, I think we need to have a discussion about the fundamental problem of a more modern approach than just boiling it down to brownfield, greenfield. And to be honest, I think it's a bit of a pity that we forced customers to think in this binary way. I think Stuart Brown from one of the advisory firms put it very nicely. He says, there's in life, it's not just black and white. It's like many shades of gray, and just like in this instead of green or brown, they sometimes talk about many shades of blue, right? In the early days when Tami and I were starting, you never really heard that word very much. It was not like it's not like all or nothing, right? I believe we have to help our customers to find a way to really go that step. In fact, I think it's kind of strange because I've seen greenfield projects which were a lot cheaper actually and a lot faster than brownfield. And it's funny to say that, but I've seen a lot of times where a lot of times if you look at a company that's moving from another system like Oracle or PeopleSoft or something and moving over to SAP, often they have a mindset of, well, we don't have to spend all our time doing as is because that as is going away. We're just going to go to the front, and they just try to maximize the value of what they get. Whereas if you're an ECC customer, you're sometimes saying, well, we first have to study and do some archaeology and look at what we need because we are taking SAP with us, right? And so you have this dichotomy of how to do that. So we're trying to think of a way to help customers through this. And I think a lot of firms, it's not just us. I mean, many firms are doing this right now. You often hear about Bluefield and you hear about different approaches. I believe one should get away from this binary brown, green, and really come to the point where we say, let's first look at the value in the future. And then now let's see what is the value of the past that we might have to bring with us, and then take it from there. Does that make sense, Ross?
Yeah. Was this what you were sort of describing, Bob, there?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I was going to ask you if you could put this up. Yeah. So, when we look at most commonly and now this applies mainly to an SAP ECC customer or a SAP install base. It doesn't so much apply to a new customer. But often what we see is, if you imagine for a moment you're moving from a horse carriage to a car, to a motor car, what I often find is the first thing one does is one looks at the old world, and one says, okay, let's study our ECC system. Let's look at what we have in the as is. Let's go look at what customizations we have and so on. And then what you do is you make a decision. You say, okay, I want to do either green, brown, blue, whatever. And then you'll do blueprinting and you'll look at it, and then you'll go to the implementation. Now, the reason there's a horse in front of the car is sometimes we see some very weird things that happen, because if you start with system archaeology and you're looking at a horse carriage, it's maybe a silly analogy, but what you'll very quickly find is the horse is the most valuable thing in a horse carriage, because that's where the energy comes from. So one of the first ticks you'll get in the Excel is we got to bring the horse with us. Now, this sounds very silly, but I can tell you stories of customers I've seen where we have really bizarre things in the new system where you say, why would you use this like this? I saw one customer who, for every salesperson, had a plant, and they said, well, the last system we came from, we did MRP for each salesperson, and you see these strange things that come. And I think what's more important, and maybe you can flip to the next slide, right, is we believe there's real value in starting with the future first. Leave the horse carriage there for a second and try to understand what value and power SAP can bring, right? What is the power of the innovations that's come over the last decade? What are the things that are there? Let us look at the best practice, the standard, regardless if you want to do green or brownfield. And I'll get to that in a second. And then first test drive and look at your future, how it would look. And when I say test drive, I don't mean just a model company or a thing, but try to test your future. And we try to help companies do that, right? Look at your company, the way it would look. And then we go back And we don't think it's necessary to throw the baby out with the bathwater by doing everything green or brown. What we can do is we can take each process. So if you're a company that has 100 processes, for example, you could say, hey, actually these 40 processes actually are very common to all companies in the world. Why would we not go to best practice? And then you can say those are green. And then you can take the next 40 processes and you can say, okay, these ones are actually really specialized to us and where our company is very different. And we can actually bring things from the past with us. So you can say, let's make those brown, you know. And then there might be 20 where you say, actually, we have to do a kind of a hybrid of this, or we can have to do something special or whatever it is, right? You can, sometimes we call it, you know, fit to design or whatever it is. And so we believe that this is kind of a way that can help customers also firstly reduce the risk, because you see your future first and you can work very early on with this. And instead of getting wrapped around the axle of greenfield versus brownfield, take it process by process, cut those 100 processes into like almost like 100 mini projects when you go there, right? So that's kind of the way we see that. And I think it's the way to increase the value and reduce the risk on this, you know.
No, that's very interesting, and I would encourage anybody else, if I see a number of questions that are being posed, so please keep those coming. I'm going to try to incorporate that in, and I'm wondering, Tami, maybe with that slide back up for a second, there is maybe you can add your perspective on it, and maybe talk about the other things in SAP's evolution, because I know there's a series of other things in the ecosystem, accelerators and things like that that maybe helps complement this strategy.
Absolutely. So I think that, SAP, obviously our goal is to get everybody to, we always say persistent state of innovation, but in order to achieve that and get the AI results and everything, you really have to go back to, a fit to standard type clean core. And we do recognize that not all customers, everybody will have a different starting point. I'll put it that way, but at least put a stake in the ground that says, hey, I'm not going to do any more modifications, or I'm going to start with data cleansing. And maybe I'm going to work with, an accelerator like Synity, because we partner with Synity to do data cleansing and management. And we've got other packages. I'm going to use Tricent as an example. And I have to give Damian Johnson the props for this one, because he gave me the numbers. But I mean, if you look at a customer's project plan to do a process, to do something like this, it's about more than 40% of a project plan is probably testing. Every business process has to be tested. Well, we partner with Tricentis for that automated testing, and they touch more applications than just cloud ERP. So we've got these partners. I'll name a couple more. We've got, SmartShift, MigNow, Panaya that we work with from a code remediation perspective to help get rid of the custom code that you don't need, or remediate it into business technology platform. So we can help get you to a clean core. This mitigates your risk. It accelerates your timeline. And I think it fits right in with what Bob talked about and the what LeapGreat offers. So I think it's a great, synergy there.
And Bob, how, speaking of that sort of thing, I guess it's what you call sort of the tool chain, Tami, which includes things like Signavio and LeanIX and other things. I know LeapGreat's been investing in technology to leverage the tool chain. What did you see as the additional need, and why did you do that?
Was that for me, Ross? Or for
Yeah.
Tami? So, so yeah, I think, when you think back to the old days, right? We really just had, the software was really just the SAP system, right? The core system. And all around it, we did all sorts of things on paper, right? We drew architectures, we drew processes, we did all, and then as PowerPoint and Excels and stuff started, we started to fill lots of those digitally, right? But I think, a lot of that stuff is so abstract, but the world has changed a lot. There's many, many tools around that help us to automate a lot of that stuff. So we can not only graphically design the processes, the architecture, so things like, looking at Signavio, the tool chain in Signavio, LeanIX, things like that. Then Tami mentioned, things like Tricentis, where we can automate, or SmartShift to do the code remediation. So there's a whole layer of technology which is helping you on those journeys. But of course, as I said, there's a whole lot of technology, right? So of course you have to learn those technologies, you have to learn those things. So what we try to do is bring those things together and kind of not only give you a test drive of your future application, but give you a test drive of what all these tools will do for you. So with Tricentis, how do we bring testing much earlier into the process? We had one of these LinkedIn Live sessions with Tricentis a few months ago, right, where we talked about this. And so we believe that a lot of times our customers, when I talk to customers, they look at this as very daunting, right? They say, when I think of going from ECC to S4HANA, it's not just going from ECC to S4HANA, it's also going from Solution Manager to Cloud ALM. It's also going from my PowerPoints to Signavio. It's also going, from this kind of testing to that kind of testing, right? So it's like a whole world of technology. So we're trying to take the complexity out of that, boil it down to say, actually, it's not that difficult to do, right? And then what we do on top of that is we try to say, listen, in this process, see if you can go to the standards, see how close you can get. But we're not religious about it. We know you have to take some of the old world with you, and some of it will be brown, some of it will be green. I think the more green you get, the more you'll be prepared for things like Tami said with AI, and some of the new innovations that are out there. And AI is not magic. It has to understand things, right? And the best way to teach an AI system is to give it stable structures. And the more stable it is, the better it'll be able to work on your structures. So I think it's extremely key, right?
No, that's very interesting. And I know we've got a number of questions. I'm going to weave it in. And although we're technically past our time, there's a lot of discussion. So we're not beholden to that. So we're going to keep going a little bit longer with Bob and Tami. So thinking of that, what Bob just mentioned, Tami, where you're kind of leveraging processes, which, as I understand it, Bob, you're saying that, you're sort of tying everything back to that common way to sort of approach it, and not only to align your project and tools, but what's the perspective there from your side, Tami, about leveraging processes in this way?
Oh, I think it's key to the business, of course. And I think Signavio, LeanIX, are obviously applications that can help drive that, making sure that you're moving to a more efficient process. LeanIX is, to me, it's a fascinating tool because, so I was 30 years ago or probably 34 years ago when I was a customer, I would build applications that I would use. My customer or my where I was working before might still be maintaining that from 35 years ago because they don't know who's using it and they don't know that they don't need to maintain it anymore because Tami Becker's gone. She left 30 years ago. But LeanIX will come in and actually tell you that. They could cut down, I'm maintaining 200 applications, but now I only have to maintain 100. And from a business process perspective, though, and I know we're running out of time, but I want to point out one huge thing from an SAP vision perspective, and that is the business data cloud. So as a part of our business processes now, we've got business data cloud that's kind of sitting for our reporting layer and for insights. But more importantly, we're going to be managing the data structures. So if you think about a business process and how often SAP enhances our business processes, every time we do that, whether it's an industry process or a finance process, some of the data structures underneath are going to change for that business process. If you're using Business Data Cloud, SAP is going to maintain those data structures. And by the way, the integration between the two. So that means you've got data, consistent data across all of your applications. So we do it for SuccessFactors, for Cloud ERP, and we're maintaining the integrations and the data layer in both the business process side and Business Data Cloud now moving forward. So if you think about your future and using AI, that is a fantastic direction to go. And I think that's going to be another advantage for our customers because they don't have to worry about changing that. If they have a different data strategy than using Business Data Cloud, they should rethink that. Because I would want to use our structures moving forward so that I can keep my clean core, the integrations are automatic. It's just, I think the future is really exciting right now.
And Tami, I'm just picking up on something Bob had mentioned earlier about this idea of with everybody really focused on AI and sort of providing this context for AI so it can learn. And especially as we move into more agentic AI, it really needs context for that. But I was thinking, Bob talked about how bringing those processes and having standard processes bring some of that context. I got to believe, on the other hand, you're bringing together this business data with common data structures. Am I thinking of that in the right way as how this plays up to AI?
You are. I mean, that's perfect, because once you get your data cleansing done, and that could be the starting point of your journey to the cloud, if you feel like that's a good point for you. But data is everything. And if we're managing it for you across the entire business process into Business Data Cloud, where you're building your AI, with Business Technology Platform, with Joule, I think that it's all coming together for us now. I think we're thinking about the future. We're thinking about the needs of our customers and where they want to go. And LeapGreat being able to provide that vision for them, it's a win-win.
And I've got a question from Vikas, and it's maybe plays another one from Raj, where there's questions about finance transformation. And maybe, I don't know if, Bob, you might take this with your experience with finance transformation. So the question from Vikas was, that finance transformation requires addressing internal challenges for stable changes rather than solely relying on flashy technologies and external factors. It seems to play up a little bit of the thoughts there you had about getting back to standard best practices. Could you maybe comment about that? Maybe see if that you could give Vikas some perspective.
Yeah, so I think maybe just before that, but it's a segue into that, to what Tami was saying. It's like a lot of people think of data and processes as separate things, right? And I always like to say, well, your car and fuel are also separate things, but if you want your car to drive, you need to put the fuel in the car, and the engine needs to understand how to use that. So it's like the content. So those things really go into each other. If you use the organizational elements wrongly, if you use master data wrongly, if you take things and everybody designs it, and that's part of the problem, because you have all these groups designing this stuff, but then you have to bring it into an integrated system. And now to get your finance transformation, that's where everything comes together. I mean, the reason companies exist is they have to make money, right? And so it touches all parts of the company, and so the numbers have to come together, and your structures have to be there. And that's where it becomes even more important to have the structures in place which are standard, the data design which is standard, the process design which is standard. Of course, SAP is an extremely flexible system. You can change it and do whatever you want. You can extend it, but it's better to start at a place. And now with the age of AI coming, if you want the AI to be effective, you need to be able to train AI on the context and the stable structures. And of course, SAP is not standing still. SAP is constantly innovating and building and developing. And if you want to stay on that wave of innovation, the best way to do it is to stay standard on that. And it's nowhere more true than in finance, I would say.
Okay, makes sense. And what about there's a question from Rashab, who had wondering about non-SAP data and how that would fit in. Not only for AI and things like that, but bring together, as you were saying, Bob, sort of that data together with these processes. I guess it goes back to that earlier thing you were talking about, Bob. This used to be more of a monolithic. Now we have these different sources, but I would think that the processes are maybe the common element. You may have data from other places, but it's getting your processes standard and consistent. I don't know if Tami, you have a perspective on how that fits into and complement SAP's evolving strategy?
Well, so Business Data Cloud, while we are managing all the SAP data structures, of course, our customers can add non-SAP data into that too, and merge them together for better insights, better outcomes, more reliable information from our customers, or for our customers to make decisions. So yes, Business Data Cloud will be able to take both. And I think that's absolutely key to any data strategy for any company.
And what about from your perspective, Bob, this idea with either SAP and non-SAP data and the processes, and this idea that you proposed, which was to see your system, test drive your system early, does that fit in with that strategy?
Yeah, so basically what the way we look at it is kind of, what to me, a company does many things, but every company has kind of processes, right, that go into it. And of course, you can look at a company or a system in many dimensions. You can look at it from the data side, you can look at it from the process, from the reporting, from different angles. But at the end of the day, it's really the activity of the company, which is the process, which pulls on data, which pulls on structures. And so it doesn't actually matter so much if some of that data is in other systems or some piece of the process is in a non-SAP system. You have to make sure your backbone of processes are such that you can easily communicate with that system, because those other systems, I for many years, I haven't seen companies which are wall-to-wall 100% SAP, right? They all have to talk to other systems, right? You'll always have SAP as a kind of a backbone. And that's, I think the word backbone is the most important thing. And that's like what Tami said, if you have the business data, which is your backbone, your best practice processes as a backbone, then and you standardize it, then you have a much easier time moving forward into the future, right?
Yes. Speaking of moving forward, I know we had a question from Raj a bit about, there's a lot to unpack in his question, but it seemed to center around reskilling and a different set of skills that you have to have now versus maybe in the past. And I'm just picking up on what you were just saying, Bob. Is there something, within that this idea of centering things around your processes that maybe helps in that reskilling, or as they're moving to this, evolving to this new world?
Did you want me to answer that, Ross?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and then I'll maybe see if Tami has a perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that, when you talk about upskilling, I mean, we've had this problem for decades that new technologies keep showing up, right? And of course, you can't learn all those new technologies all the time. Of course, you have to move forward and try and learn, but you can never keep up with everything that's out there. So you need an anchor. To me, the best anchor is actually business process, because at the end of the day, when Tami and I started, or you can say when our parents started doing work, there was always procurement. There was always something like order to cash. There was always procure to pay, right? I mean, you can go back as far as you want. Companies did certain processes, and they still do certain processes. So I think if you're well founded in those, and you take the mindset, okay, now I'm going to add technology to it. I'm going to add automated testing. I'm going to add AI. I'm going to add Joule, right? I'm going to do all these things. It's a much better way, I think, of moving into the future. And if you ask me, the best way you can upskill people is to give them that tool to say, look, let's anchor everything around these processes, and here are the standard ones. And the great thing about SAP is it serves you the best practices on a plate and shows you what are the world-class companies doing with that, right? And what we try to do at LeapGreat is try to make that whole process much easier by helping you serve those on a plate, and not just in a diagram, but in live, and bringing Signavio together with your live system and showing you in a world where that happens, So I think that's the exciting thing, is kind of like, the world will keep modernizing. It'll keep getting more complex and more technologies. But if you're in business enterprise software, keep your eye on the enterprise, not just the software. Make sure you understand what's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know we could probably go on for quite a bit, but we're sort of about 15 minutes over our time slot. So I think it may be the appropriate time to just maybe give a few minutes for each of you to do a quick wrap up. But I think it's been a great discussion, and I've appreciated all the questions and feedback from the audience. It's been a great interactive session. So maybe to you, Tami, in a minute, what would be your couple of key takeaways for the? Oops.
I can do that. And I do have to say, I agree with Raj on his question on the reskilling, because I think with SAP, what we're focused on is a new IT operating model, which I think will help alleviate some of the IT workloads with us doing the upgrades and all of that from a cloud ERP perspective, and allowing IT to have time to do that reskilling. But for me, I guess, talking about SAP's driving everybody to the cloud ERP, being able to obtain that persistent state of innovation, take advantage of AI. I think those are a couple key takeaways. It doesn't have to be a risky journey. We can help you plan. LeapGreat can help you plan what that journey looks like. You just have to put a stake in the ground, figure out what your starting point is, use some of our software partners that we're working with to drive that, accelerate the migration, do some risk mitigation along the way. But our ultimate goal is to get our customers to the cloud so that they're not stuck in that cost of doing nothing, but they're moving forward to that persistent state of innovation. And I think, partnering with LeapGreat, you all provide a great vision for our customers to be able to do that. So those were my takeaways.
Yeah, I love that persistent state of innovation. That's a great sort of aspirational goal. And what about for yourself, Bob? From your perspective, what are the one or two key takeaways you'd summarize for the group?
Yeah, so I think Tami summarized it really well. I think I like some of those quotes you just had. So I think these transformations are kind of once in a decade opportunity, sometimes once in a generation, right? You don't want to implement a new sports car and then have it be pulled by a horse, afterwards. You want to use the power of these technologies that are coming, and I've never been as excited about the business we're in. I wish I was still 35 years younger. I'd love to start all this again, because I think it's never been as exciting as now, and with AI coming on top of it and all these new tooling, that we see with the world of data and automation and everything, it's just really exciting. And I think the key is, how do you start with the future instead of starting with archaeology, right? Start with the future first, and then make informed decisions. You can take as much with you from the past as you want, but make sure it's founded into what you want in the future, rather than just, technically trying to bring all the baggage from the back. And we have ways to make that risk much less. And just wanted to use the last few seconds that I have also to thank Tami, for your support here, and it's been great to catch up on this. I think you can tell in both of our voices that we're really excited about the place SAP is right now, and what potential it gives to our customers. And I would just say, embrace that potential, because it might look like just a series of lots of flashy technologies, but when you bring it together, there's tremendous power. And I've seen what it means for enterprises who really adopt it. It really takes you to a new level. So thank you so much, Tami.
Thank you for having me.
It was a great discussion today, and really, I think highlighted how companies can really take this evolving positioning that SAP is bringing together. And where I really see is this whole back to this risk, how do we bring down the risk and really bring up all the value and achieve that goal that you have, that continuous innovation. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining and the participation from the audience. We'll be having our next LinkedIn Live in April, and so stay tuned for some announcements around that, and I hope that you'll join us then. And this session will also be posted later today for those that may want to share it with others or review some of the comments. So thanks everybody for staying longer, and for our panel today for a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Thanks, everyone.